of the book of Genesis. Genesis 1, looking at God's creation here. Let's read verse 20. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth, and the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, with the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day." So again, we have a few consistencies that we find here in regards to the creation that we've had in the others. We have the morning and the evening. We have the word day, and I would put forth the idea that those are a day, and not something other than a day, but actual a day as in 24 hours. And we see God is here at work, and he's very involved in verses 20, 21, and 22. It begins each of those with, and God. And God's very involved here. He didn't, as some would put forth the idea that God sort of turned the wind up and let it go and, see how it turns out. But God is very involved here. Also, we see again that some would try and put forth the idea that evolution, and might term it theistic evolution, having God involved there, would basically be what's happening here in Genesis chapter 1. And if that is indeed what's happening, then regrettably the writer, who I would believe to be Moses, got it severely out of sorts and out of whack here, because we see verse 22, we have birds here, fowl, we have birds there, and birds, we are told today, come from, anybody know what birds come from today? Bird, that's true. What would an evolutionist say birds come from? Birds do come from birds. That's very true. That's all we've ever witnessed. Dinosaurs, that's right. We're told that birds come from dinosaurs, and that's not true. And it doesn't hold up even to science if you wanted to, and their bones are totally different, and their respiratory systems are totally different, and everything that goes with that. And but again, it's totally out of order because there are no land animals really here yet. And as we read our scriptures here, we've got to wait yet another day, which may be 24 hours, or if you listen to others, it may be a very long, long time. So it's a wonder how those birds got there and what they were doing for all that time. That's the evolutionary story that tries to remove God. And then that's not so surprising. The unfortunate part is those that try and mix the two together. And that's where it really doesn't work very well. It's okay to say one or the other, I suppose. I definitely believe the way Scripture has written it is true, but trying to mix them makes things all the more confusing. Created great whales. That's a word that is elsewhere translated many times in the Old Testament scriptures as dragons. So this could also be termed like sea monsters or something to that effect. It wasn't necessarily just like a blue whale, but other creatures within there, and the word is translated dragon repeatedly elsewhere in the Old Testament. One of those may be referenced in Job, and that would be Leviathan, who is mentioned as a great creature in the water. In Job chapter 41, verse 1, can you draw him out? Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Okay, can you do that? And he goes on and describes him, and the idea is, no, you can't do that. And why can't you do that? Well, you can't do that because this animal is too powerful and too mighty for you. So, if you continue reading in Job chapter 41, you will also see that he breathes fire. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostril goes smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. What exactly do you do with that? His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. That's pretty straightforward there. So exactly what do you do with that? Some would try to describe it as allegory, or it's not a real animal, but he's just using allegory there, or hyperbole, and trying to really get Job's attention there. But as you look at God's speech there to Job, and as he's building up to this, everything else except the next animal we talk about is a real animal. He talks about real animals and things that Job would know about, and on it goes. And then he gets to these two mighty animals, one on land and one in water, and we're told, well, God's not really serious there. He's just trying to get Job's attention, and trying to make certain that he's awake and listening to him. We don't have to hold to that view, the idea that that God is really just trying to get he's trying to get Job's attention, all right, but he's using it through actual things that Job sees in his life every day, and that he's fully aware of. That's the thing. And that would be one thing that could be a mighty great whale, elsewhere translated as dragon. And something that, which we hear, of course we have all sorts of legends and down through different cultures about dragons breathing fire. I'm sure Hollywood's made some great movies about flying dragons with breathing fire and all of that. Those may be a little enhanced than what Scripture would talk to us about, but they do talk about animals that breathe fire. They do talk about flying serpents. Those are in there. It's not, necessarily as good as Hollywood would make it look, but it is true, whereas Hollywood's may not be true. But that's one thing that we see, the idea that this animal breathed fire, and also we see cultures down through the ages all over the world talk about these animals that breathe fire. All right, Genesis 1, the great whales, everything that moves, and every winged fowl, and God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. All right, anybody got any questions they want to bring out on any of those verses? Not, we'll move on to the next day. But again, take note of the repetition here, that God is telling us this is a real day, not like back in the day or something to that effect, but not like flying across the country or flying across the country. But this is a literal day of 24, like Wednesday today is 24 hours. All right. Let's go on to verse 24. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over everything that moveth upon the earth. All right, we'll stop there at verse 28. God's bringing forth the animals now, making the animals, creating them, and again we find them after their kind, which would go completely contrary to the evolutionary concept that everything comes out of, one original single cell out of the sea, and then it comes forth, and then it comes forth, and then it comes forth. the order again is totally out of sorts. And now we have cattle, and that would go with just about, as some put forward here, the idea that this is all the domesticated animals. It may be true. Creeping things, so like the insects and little, what we might term nasty animals today, like mice and moles and all sorts of yucky things like that nobody likes. But we see the beasts of the earth. Many would say those are like the really big animals. That could be like elephants and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. But some I've seen put forth the idea that where it says beast of the earth, that has to do with the dinosaurs specifically. The beast of the earth has to do with the dinosaurs specifically. I will not put forth that conjecture here, but that is one possible idea. The idea that these are dinosaurs here. What we do know is that God, if He is God, did make the dinosaurs. And we have little reason to doubt that He did. And so, you know, it's something that goes very contrary to our, obviously, modern world and the scientific world, that what it tells us is allowed. And this is one that would really catch people off guard. Even, you know, if you walk up to the typical believer and, you know, you start, well, did God create the world? Of course God created the world. Did man live with dinosaurs? And they look at you like you got 4 eyes on your head. I'm not talking about a pair of glasses either. They would look at you like you're pretty strange. Because, why? Why? Is that because they've read their Bible so much and it doesn't seem to be possible, or is it because, you know, they've lived in the world and the culture and the science tells them you can't do that? 65 million years ago, that's when the last dinosaurs lived, and it's impossible for any of them to be alive today, or to have lived with man. Yeah, not that I'm advocating that they're alive today. But we would hold to the idea that God made them on the 6th day. And Job, again, is where we can go to that. Job chapter 40. Behemoth he is called, and he is an animal that is described in great detail. And beginning with verse 15 of Job 40, says he eats grass like an ox. So that's sort of like a great Brachiosaurus type, sauropod type. But the big key here, I mean, anything could eat grass like an ox. A cow could eat grass like an ox. A goat could eat grass like an ox. And that's not a dinosaur. It's just an annoying animal. So it's not that, you know. But the real kicker here, or the real point, one that really shores it up, is verse 17. It says he moves his tail like a cedar. So he's got a tail like a cedar tree. And many Bible footnotes will now try and, if you have a Bible that has footnotes, many of them today will say this is an elephant, or perhaps a hippopotamus. And we know how massive the tails are on the hippos and the elephants. Not really, but that's what we're saying and hoping that nobody really thinks. But his bones are strong as piece of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He's chief in the ways of God. So, you know, on and on, he gives a big detailed description. You know, why do we doubt that this is really true? We doubt it because, I'm not saying that you do doubt it, but many people would doubt it because God, you know, because the culture and God have to be separate, we're told. In the idea that we have to listen to one or the other, and you listen to God and you listen to the Bible for spiritual things and how to get to heaven when you die, and you listen to the world if you want to be smart. That's what we're told. That's not necessarily true, obviously, but that is indeed what we are told many times. So beasts of the earth would definitely include dinosaurs. It probably includes other things as well. But one thing, again, we notice is after the kind. There's the kinds again. They're not morphing into something else. You know, it's not like the dinosaurs on day 6 morphed into the birds on day 5. That would be really difficult to happen. And we've never, of course, witnessed that. To have anything where we see a transition of that occurring is very rare, because we don't see it occurring, and the fossils record does not really bear that out. Another thing to go against that is the multitude, and there is quite a multitude of fossils that have been found that contain soft flesh in them. And how in the world does that happen when they're 65 million years old? But, what happens there? Christians might be able to learn a little bit something from those who would hold to the evolutionary theory, and the idea, if you put that forth and say, well, how does this dinosaur have red blood in its bone? And they would say, well, I guess I never really thought about it, but I guess Genesis is literally true as it's written, and it's 24-hour days, and I'm going to become a believer in Jesus Christ. Now, is that what do they say that? No, I'm sure there's some that have. But what do most of they say? They say, well, I guess we don't know all the wonderful methods of preservation that have happened here. So what they're doing there is they're just being consistent with their view, their world viewpoint, and how they view things. And they view things through millions and billions of years. Christians would be wise to not view things through millions and billions of years, but to maintain and hold true to what they do believe. And a problem may be, many times, we don't know how we view things. So we have to get that figured out, exactly what do we view things through, and what do we, how do we filter things through. So it's important to do that. But something to learn there. Hold true to your beliefs, just because some new evidence comes forward. We're like, oh my, I guess it's over, and the Bible isn't really true. We don't do that. We shouldn't do that. A lot of people have done that, but we shouldn't, and we have no need to. God sees that it is good. It would be really strange, I think, for God to see that this is good as they're ripping each other's heads off. Maybe perhaps they weren't ripping each other's heads off just yet. That's why, again, we need to hold to the idea or to understand or try and think about this, that right now they're not ripping each other's heads off. And when we see fossils where there's cancer in bones and animals are killing each other as it's occurring, that occurs after the fall and not billions and millions of years before it. It's good. Okay, verse 26, God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And again, a Jewish perspective on this is that when God said, let us, and there's a plurality there in the idea of God, that's God, this is a one God, singular. There's no Godhead or Trinity, as you Christians like to think up fancifully, thinking that that's something to believe in. But they would say, this is God talking to the angels. But in verse 26, notice, God said, let us make man in our image. He's not making man in the image of angels at all. He's making man in the image of God. So that lends itself to the plurality of God there, and it lends itself, I believe, to the Trinitarian precepts that we see coming forward in the New Testament writings. Make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle. Okay, so God makes man here. He's getting ready to, and he's telling us that the man and the woman and the humans are going to be over the earth, and they're going to be over the fish of the sea, over the fowl. They're going to be in control of that. So understanding that man is going to be more highly ranked, more important than animals. But he's actually going to be over them. And later on we shall read, he'll have dominion over, that means he controls them, and He is over them. Now, what we're told today is, well, you can't live, you can't plant that field because there's a endangered bacteria that lives there, and we have to preserve that. Maybe it's not an endangered bacteria, it's an endangered water bug that we can't possibly see. I don't know, there might be an endangered bacteria they're protecting somewhere. But that, I believe, goes against what we have here in Genesis 1. The idea that that we have to protect the endangered water bug. Now there are things, where we want to treat our earth and our world properly and respectfully, and we don't just go about destroying it, with people have been guilty of, clearly. That's why, we have a world that looks like what it looks like. But that isn't either to say that we protect things, animals, water bugs, over people, because sometimes that's what we see happening. They'll protect those things instead of, planting it for food for people. And that's a complex issue, but one of the principles there is that understanding that man, woman, when I say man, I'm talking about mankind there, is, the supreme creation of God. And of course it's frustrating, for me anyway, for individuals to desire to protect the, some silly blue killer whale or something, and not, humans. As much as you may like blue killer whales or whatever it might happen to be. Yes, I know there's blue whales and killer whales. I'm just creating a new breed there. So, what? Yes, I was going to say that. Evolution is occurring right before your eyes, as I just made a new whale. Whatever it might be, whatever's endangered, then, the supreme thing that we're looking at is people. And it's amazing how quickly good-hearted Bible believers, Christians, can fall into the idea that, but this animal or that animal or that. Yeah, that's true, but, look at how many babies got aborted today. Or, look at the idea of how many people are just sitting over in a corner in a hole of a nursing home because nobody cares about them or wants to see them or listen. That. And I realize there are difficulties with, bringing your mother or your grandmother or whatever into your house, but the extreme places that people will go to protect animals when they, we have to understand what's really important here. And verse 27, God created man in his own image. The image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Some pointed out the idea that there's three creations there in verse 27, maybe an allusion to Trinitarian principles. I did reference the Truth Project some time ago. I don't really remember when, and you probably don't either. But I did reference that, and I didn't like their section on creation, because it was basically intelligent design, which still leaves open the idea for millions and billions of years. But one thing they did really good was they brought out this principle that all throughout the world and all throughout culture and all throughout society you find things of three. And you especially see that, of course, in the American government. You see that in the three branches of the government, on and on we go, and down the list we could go. And they brought out how that was based upon biblical ideas and the mode of three there, which they said comes from the Trinitarian idea. Whether or not that's what's getting at here in verse 27, I don't know, but it is kind of interesting that we have a triple statement there. Created in God's image, what does that mean? And I'm sure I don't know all of what it means, and I'm sure you probably don't either. What's a few things it means? Well, it means, we're the only things that are created in God's image. My dog isn't. As nice a dog as he is, he's not created in the image of God. The dead mouse between the washer and dryer was not created in the image of God. Only people are. Only humans are. They're the only ones that are created in the image of God. And what does that mean? Well, that means we have, you can look at some differences. Animals, though, and humans both have what's called living soul, living breath of life. A spirit or a soul, not in the sense that they're redeemed, but sort of like they're alive. That's pretty clear to see. They're not like trees. Trees are alive, but when trees are dead, we can sit on them, and when deer are dead, we don't sit on them, unless they've been to the taxidermist or something to that effect. Usually, if my dog dies, and I leave him lay out there in the yard for 2 weeks, and Logan just cuts around him when he cuts the grass and leaves him lay there, nobody's going to go sit on him in 2 weeks. But if a tree falls down and, hey, why don't you take a break from cutting grass? Nobody hesitates to sit on the tree. So that's a little bit what we're talking about, the living spirit there that's in animals. But man, women are created in the image of God, in the sense that we alone think really like we think, in the sense that my dog has no concept of thinking. I say, no matter how many times you try, you're not going to get that cat on the edge of the road. But does he listen to me? Does he think? Does he say, you know what, you're right, I don't know what I was thinking? No, he jerks as hard as he can, as long as he can, until the cat disappears. He doesn't think. He's not intellectual like that. He doesn't worship God. He doesn't say, hey, could you play Victory in Jesus for me? He doesn't do that. He doesn't worship God like that. Animals don't. Only people do that. They're the only ones that do that. They alone are like that. And that's just a couple things. Does that mean that God, sits around and thinks and, worships, and that's all that it means to be made in the image of God? No, that doesn't mean that's all. I don't think we can exhaust exactly everything that means. I think it's a pretty vast concept. Exactly what in the world does it mean to be made in the image of God? There's the spiritual aspect, in the sense that there's literally a spirit in there that, why do we get convicted or think we shouldn't do things or think some things are wrong? Or I think that's God's spirit dealing with us, in the sense that animals don't do that. They don't do that. They don't. They're animals. That's why they're animals. It is, of course, telling that when God did come to earth, what did he come as? Well, he came as a man, people like to say, well, that doesn't mean that God has arms and legs and a nose and a mouth and ears. No, God is spirit, and we can go on and on talking about that. But what we do find is that God references the idea that he sees and he hears and he listens, and he does this and he does that, and the idea that these are things that he has given to us, I believe, to help us to be able to worship him properly and to live out our lives and to glorify him properly. Some people also, moving back to that idea about the environmentalism, the concept that, as you're looking at God creating the world here, that there's a time where he's got the world made and he's got plants there, he's got everything set up, but there's nothing there. Or you could even carry that to the idea where he's got the water and the aquatic animals, he's got the land animals, but he doesn't have people yet. And some people say, that's where we need to get back to. The problem with this place is you. That's right, people. That's the problem. We talked a little bit about that in the study of Revelation, the population reduction ideas that people are trying to get going, and there are a multitude of them, and how they would like to reduce the population of the world, and on they go. People think that we need to get back to this, but God created his world to be inhabited. That is why he did that. We find that in Isaiah 45 and verse 18. For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. See, I didn't make it up, Lord, and there's none else. So, that's an important thing, and not to lose sight of that, because it's quick. It would be easy to listen to the secular culture and the secular world that tells us, you're not important. We would be better off if you guys there was a lot less of you. Be a lot better off. Verse 28, God has told people to be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, to subdue it and have dominion over, and he goes on, the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. He's told people to be fruitful and multiply. He has not rescinded that. He has restated that elsewhere, restated that after the flood. He has not rescinded that. Generally, the ones that are least likely to be fruitful and multiply are Christians, and that's definitely one thing that the Islamic faith has. That's one way they grow so rapidly. Is they would take that mandate seriously. Be fruitful and multiply. Replenish replenish? Okay, that word there, replenish. Some would try and say, aha. You remember way back in verses 1 and 2 when we had that flood in between verses 1 and 2, and we had that gap theory, and there was Lucifer's flood, and we had real long ages in time. This is what they would point to as well. Replenish. It's not for the first time, but it's a replenish. They're redoing it because, you know why? Because there was that flood between verses 1 and 2 that doesn't really say it was there, but don't let that get in your way. There was a flood there, and it destroyed everything, and that's where all your fossils come from. That's where your dinosaurs come from and everything else. That's what they would say. Not true. Replenish here, at the time it was translated, King James Version was translated, that was an accurate statement because the word replenish didn't necessarily mean to do it a second time. It meant merely to fill it. If I would say in 1611, and me and Caleb were sitting at the table, and I said, would you go replenish my coffee cup, please? That would not have been a second fill. That would have been the first time. That was when we got up in the morning and I wanted a cup of coffee. Now go get it for me. But the word replenish there in the English in the early 1600s was used in the idea of filling the first time. The Hebrew word there is used in the same sense, filling the first time. So it's not an argument for or a point to be made in the idea that we could say that there was a massive flood and there Lucifer's flood, and even though everything's not really good, God is saying it's really good. Indeed, we find no argument for that. Verse 29, God said, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat, and it was so. So, originally, people are vegetarians. They're only eating green things. And some people, the only green thing they eat is gum. But here we have everything we eat is the herbs of the field. It didn't have to just be green, but it was all the vegetation there. And also we notice the animals there and the fowls and everything. What did they originally eat? They originally ate herbs, vegetation, pineapples, coconut, oranges, mangoes, papayas, on and on we go down the list. And, that's what they ate. Big sharp teeth does not necessarily mean that they had to eat meat. I like to eat meat, but I don't really have that many big sharp teeth like a black bear in Pennsylvania waiting to snatch someone hiking on the trails might have. But, a bear is a really good example of that. Even today, bears' main diet is berries and nuts and stuff like. Yes, they like fish when they can, but the biggest part of their diet is berries and nuts and whatnot. And if you go back and look at this bear called a cave bear, which was a really big, big bear that we don't see anymore, I think he might be the original bear kind. If not, he's definitely on the path to the original bear kind. But he's much larger, like 50% bigger than we see of the biggest grizzly bear today. But something even evolutionists will tell us today is that this bear, who was just massive in size, he didn't go out and eat 150 salmon a day. But what he did was, he originally ate just vegetation. I said, you don't say. That's just crazy talk. I mean, look at his big sharp teeth he's got. And where else do we read about it? Well, we read about that also in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 30, where the animals are eating green herbs for meat. And his teeth was even bigger and sharper than the bears we see today. So, anybody got any comments or questions they want to bring out? We'll stop there at verse 30. And, yeah.
Do you think all the animals were friendly?
All the animals were friendly. Well, I would say in a nutshell, yes. At that point, clearly, what we know for certain is that the animals weren't eating each other. The animals weren't. I believe when we talk about what I would term the millennial time, or perhaps even the time after millennium, when we look at new heaven, new earth, and all of that, we talk in Isaiah, the lion and the lamb laying down together, the child playing by the nest of the snakes. I can tell you it wouldn't be me playing by the nest of the snake, but apparently some people will be. But yeah, in the sense, I don't think that necessarily means that they were all in a perfect mood all the time, but they definitely weren't attacking each other, I don't think, until the rebellion by humans, clearly brought on a lot of problems, to put it about as the mildest understatement you could ever say. There's a lot of issues there in regards to that, but that's, yeah.
Do you think the snake stood up?
Um,
You think it had a backbone?
Still has a
Do I think the snake stood up? Does it have a backbone? It still has a backbone. That's the only bone it's got, I guess. But I don't know. I guess I'll just say I have no clue on that one. We'll talk more about that when we get to chapter 3. There are some interesting thoughts on exactly what that is. And some people actually think it was like sort of like an orangutan type animal. Which seems quite out. We'll lay it out when we get there. Don't hang me just yet. But I didn't say I believed that. I said some people do. But the idea of how they go down on their hands and eat dust, and because they're always going down like that. Big, long interpretation. But we'll get to that later. But I'm not saying that's what I think it is. I think it was, the serpent, the snake. Evil, vile things that I can't stand. But I guess we'll get to that more when we get to that in chapter 3. Anyone else?
Does having dominion over animals include taking care of them?
Well,
Does it include watching out for the endangered water bugs?
the endangered water bug. Does it include watching out for the endangered water bug? In a sense, it might, I would say, but not at the sacrifice of people. I think those are things that have to be, it's an interesting thing because, things have been they go extinct every day. And they have for years and years. And I think it's interesting now that we have the capabilities to stop that from happening, saying, no, you can't shoot that thing. Why not? I'm hungry. Because, here, shoot, in our day, there are other things that we can eat or do, or things to protect that animal. And I think, you would have some, it's certainly not wrong to do that, to protect the animal from being totally killed off. But never at the sacrifice of people, We're not going to say that, The big issue for me isn't so much Americans, most Americans have lots of food. Now there is, the growing segment that people are, it's coming to America, people are hungry and don't have food. But, say for a third world country, is it wrong for, this guy in the village in Angola I don't know if Angola even has villages, they might be a little more. Okay, let's go to the middle of the Congo, and there's a guy in a village, and, he's got a chance to kill the last water bug, and it's a really delicious meal. Should he not do that? Absolutely he should do that, because I think, in that sense that people definitely trump the water bug. Again, we're using water bug just as an example, but when, you weigh all those things out and try and use a little, dare I say, common sense, which might be a fleeting thing in our day, but but many times what people are doing is they're protecting those at the sacrifice of people, and even you can see that with the water bug in America, because that let's say there's I've read of cases usually in western states where there's fields out there, big fields all around us we see here, and they say, who owns these fields? Terwilligers, Kenny, whoever owns them, all these massive farmers around here, David Byler, whoever it might be. But they say you can't plant that anymore. Okay, well, they go buy some different fields, no big deal. But what we've done there is, after a while, we run out of fields to buy because we've protected so much stuff. And also what we've done, you may still have enough corn, on your plate, but the shipping out of corn has decreased. Now, I'm not saying that's what has happened exactly, but I say, huh? What?
Because we're burning it.
That's another thing. Don't be burning your corn. At some point there's going to be a tipping point. But that's something. So lots of times I think Americans won't really see that, because you can still go get your corn on the cob and dab your butter on there if you want, or maybe use some substitute, whatever. But what we don't see is the impact that might be made on the Congo, or whatever, any other, or Haiti, or wherever, anywhere, some country that we might be able to bless. There is not a shortage of land to grow food at. We could, if we planted things right and did things right, we could feed the world in like one state with just turn Kansas or Wyoming into farmland, and you do it right. There's enough things to do there. But many times I think, we have to understand that people that are in control of the world, lots of times, they're not Bible believers. And we have to look, as we've already went through Revelation, we see there are evil things that are occurring, and the stage is being set for one world systems to come into place. They're not looking for us to fulfill the mandate of Genesis 1. They're looking for us, or for themselves, to fulfill the mandate of Revelation 13. And sometimes we can get sidetracked and say, you know what, that's a good idea. That poor old water bug, he deserves to live too. But, we make sure that we're looking at the big picture, I think. But weighing all those things in balance, it's like, don't kill so many whitetails this year. You can kill turkeys instead. I see turkeys everywhere. And did you kill a whitetail? No, I don't think. No. Okay. But that's an interesting question. Do we have, does having dominion, subduing things, have to do with taking care of animals in the sense of protecting them like that? And that's not something that we can just say, no, I don't know what you're talking about, be quiet, you go stomp everything down with my foot. I don't think the answer is that, but I do think we always understand that people are more important. They're made in the image of God, even if we can sustain them just for one more day, so that they might get an opportunity to hear the redemption message and understanding what's really important there. But keeping big picture, and there is a really big picture there in focus, because many times we might say, well, we're just trying to do this so they'll be able to live a glorious life like I do, and they get to go to McDonald's and buy ice cream whenever they want. And that's not really what it's all about at all. But what it's all about is being redeemed unto our Creator, and being restored unto that, and making sure that we don't get caught up in a message that would actually be contrary to Genesis 1, that we want to be faithful to it, but at the same time not be flippant with it, I guess, is what I would say. All right. With that, we will close in prayer. Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time together and for each one that is here. We praise you for your goodness to us, for your message that you have given us. We thank you for creating each of us and for putting us here this evening. We thank you for the message of redemption that you have made available to each of us. And we pray that we would never lose sight of the importance of that and understanding how that is the critical role and factor that we should be about and that we should be proclaiming. Pray that you would give us safety and protection as we go from here, that you would watch over us, and you would bring us back at the next appointed time. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed.